Hi guys, welcome to biology lesson 4.04 part 2 on photosynthesis. You might be wondering why I already have drawings made and I didn't make them as I went. I totally flubbed this video, so I am re-recording it, but I didn't want to use a new sheet because I want to reference some of these notes up here and I have this all filled in. So if you want to, you can kind of catch up. You can pause the video here and catch up the drawings, or you can pause it later and catch it up when I explain them. So in the last video, we talked about the light reactions of photosynthesis. We said they took place in the thylakoid membrane. Pigments trap the sunlight. The energy was used to split water, and the oxygen was given off as waste. And then we make these two molecules, ATP and NADPH. So really, this is the only thing that's produced in the light reactions that we were after. All that work is for a couple of molecules. Well, that doesn't seem very efficient, but we're going to see why that's an issue. So before we go on, we have to talk about why these molecules are so important. So I drew 4 diagrams. I have NADPH and ATP, and I drew them as batteries. So these represent batteries. So this battery has a P on it, and this battery has an H on it. And they have these little sparky lines to indicate these are fully charged batteries. You get them out of the package, and I have over here hydrogen and phosphate. Then over here, I have the same batteries, but this is NADP and this is ADP. So they've lost their phosphate group and they've lost their hydrogen. And this guy's kind of wilting. That's why he's saying sigh. And this guy's like, meh, I don't care much. So these are dead batteries. Well, it turns out if you have NADP and ADP, they've got no juice. It's like a dead battery. There's nothing you can do with it. But just like you have rechargeable batteries at home, you can snap these things into a recharger. And if you put a phosphate back on ADP, you get ATP. If you put a hydrogen on NADP, you get NADPH. And these guys are like charged batteries. They are good to go. They're ready to run something. Well, guys, that was basically the job of the light reactions. What the light reactions did was they charged our batteries. They charged our batteries that are going to let us run the second half. And they charged it using sunlight. So if you've ever used something that's solar, it's like a solar powered battery charger. So what's the point for the second one? We still are no closer to making glucose. And isn't that the whole job? Don't we want glucose? Isn't that the purpose for photosynthesis? Well, that's going to happen down here. So we're going to have glucose coming out. We're going to be producing glucose. And remember, these are also called the dark reactions, not because they have to happen in the dark, but because they don't need sunlight. So we've got glucose, which is C6H12O6. We've got tons of hydrogen floating around. We're not too worried about that. So where are we getting this carbon and this oxygen? Well, what's the other? Let's rewrite the reaction for photosynthesis. So we have 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O gives us C6H12O6 plus 6 O2. All right, well, we use the water in the light reactions. So this was in the light reactions. And we gave this off in the light reactions. LR is light reactions. We're making this in the Calvin cycle. So this is a Calvin cycle product. This is a light reaction product. This was a light reaction reactant. So where's our stuff coming from? It's coming from carbon dioxide. We're bringing into the plant through the openings in the leaf CO2. You're taking a gas. So have you stopped and thought about this? You're taking gas out of the air and you're turning it into solid food. We call that carbon fixation. Carbon fixation. Turning gaseous carbon into a solid food source or energy source. Plants can literally make food out of thin air. So how do they do that? They use the energy in the NADPH and the ATP. We've got our charged up NADPH ATP. So that energy pulls the carbon dioxide out of the air. This is from the air. And turns it into glucose. Well, that's pretty cool. So what happens to our NADPH? Once we use the hydrogen and the phosphate, we've got this left. Well, you might as well recycle them. You might as well recharge them. And so what happens is and I almost forgot to mention, where does this take place? It takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast. It takes place in the stroma. So the light reactions take place in the thylakoid discs, the thylakoid membranes. The dark reactions take place in the stroma. So when we're done with these, we've got these dead batteries. Well, we might as well send them back to be recharged. And so what happens is out of the Calvin cycle, what we send back is ADP and NADP. I'll put a little charge there to indicate it's dead, plus. This goes up the light reactions in the presence of light and water. It gets charged, comes back down, powers this to go around, sends it back out, and we have a cycle. Cycle means something that goes around, and that's what we have going around. So it turns out that carbon dioxide is a reactant in the Calvin cycle. So we could split this out into two equations if we wanted to. We could talk about the light reactions. Being water into O2, and we charge our NADP and our ADP and our NADP plus to get ATP. Excuse me, and NADPH. We could summarize the Calvin cycle. Right down here. As taking CO2 and turning that into glucose. And then we recycle the ADP and the NADP plus back to the light reactions. So it's a little bit complex, but if you stop and you take the time and you break it down, it all kind of makes sense. You might have to watch this video more than once. And I'm just trying to think in my head if we covered all the things that we need to talk about with photosynthesis. So our summaries, our takeaways are kind of here. I kind of summarized it up when we did here. So basically we did all of that to talk about how the light reactions split water. They use that water split to charge up ADP and NADP plus into these compounds. The Calvin cycle is where we actually make our glucose, our carbon dioxide into our glucose. And you really do need to have an understanding of how these energy molecules work. Also pigments. We talked about pigments back in the part 1. So we were going to continue on with our steps. That's what I was going to do. So we left off with step 6. We use a hydrogen to create ATP and NADPH. Step number 7 is the ATP and the NADPH energy are used to turn CO2 into C6H12O6. So most of our steps came in the last section. So there were quite a few steps because we had to talk about what happened with the pigments there. But to sum it up, we've got these two right here. Understand what's going on with the energy molecules. And that is our series on photosynthesis. Email if you have questions or you see anything wrong with the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.